For nearly 3,000 years, history pretended she never existed. Her statues were smashed. Her name was cut from stone. Her face was replaced with the faces of men. Then, in 1903, an archaeologist opened a sealed tomb in the Valley of the Kings and found something that wasn't supposed to be there. The artifacts pointed to a woman. The inscriptions pointed to power. But the history book said this person didn't exist. Her name was Hatshepsut, and someone had spent decades trying to make sure no one would ever say it again. They almost succeeded. This is the story of what they couldn't destroy, and why they couldn't bring themselves to finish the job. The tomb was not supposed to be hers. It was small, unfinished in places. The kind of tomb you cut in a hurry or in secret, tucked into the cliffs above the valley floor, away from the grand royal chambers of the pharaohs, whose names everyone knew. The entrance had been sealed and left without ceremony. When excavators entered, they found 2 sarcophagi, 2 bodies, 1 chamber. That was strange enough, but what stopped everyone was something else entirely. One of the sarcophagi bore a royal cartouche, the oval seal that in ancient Egypt marked the name of a ruler. It had been carved and then deliberately altered. The name inside had been changed, not by time, not by accident. Someone had physically recut the stone to replace what was there before. They were standing in the burial of someone who had been edited out of their own death. The second body in that chamber was identified later, through decades of forensic work and DNA analysis. She was a woman, middle-aged at death, heavyset. She had severe dental problems and evidence of bone cancer. She had suffered, and she had ruled. Think about that for a moment. The most powerful ruler Egypt had seen in a century, and she was buried in a room that looked like it had been prepared for a servant. Here's what we know about who she was. Hatshepsut came to power around 1478 BCE. Her husband, the pharaoh Thutmose II, died young. Their son was too young to rule, so she ruled for him. That was normal, a queen regent, holding the throne until a boy was ready. But she didn't stop there. At some point, no one knows exactly when or why, she did something that had almost never been done before. She declared herself pharaoh, not a regent, not a queen consort, a pharaoh, full title, full power, full for divine authority. She wore the double crown. She wore the false beard. She was depicted in statues as a man, because that was the only visual language ancient Egypt had for supreme power. And then she ruled, not for months, not for a year or two, for more than 20 years. 22 years of one of the most prosperous periods in Egyptian history. She sent trading expeditions to a place called Punt, a distant land, possibly in the Horn of Africa, and they came back with living trees, exotic animals, gold, and incense. The walls of her mortuary temple still show those ships, still show her ambassadors arriving at a foreign court, received not as guests, but as envoys of the most powerful nation on earth. She built at a scale no one expected. Her obelisks at Karnak, the tallest in Egypt, were sheathed in electrum, a blend of gold and silver, so that at dawn they blazed like beacons visible from across the Nile. She wasn't pretending to be a pharaoh. She was one, and then she disappeared. Not immediately, not while she was alive. She died around 1458 BCE, cause unknown, though her body tells us she was ill for some time. She was buried. The rituals were observed, and for a generation, nothing happened. But then, something changed. Her stepson, Thutmose III, had grown up. He had ruled alongside her for years, technically as co-pharaoh, practically as subordinate. When she died, power returned fully to him. He went on to become one of Egypt's greatest military commanders, expanding the empire further than any ruler before him. And then, late in his reign, decades after Hatshepsut's death, the erasure began. Her name was chiseled off monuments, her face was cut from reliefs. Her statues were smashed, sometimes carefully, sometimes violently, and buried in pits behind her own temple. The obelisks she had built at Karnak were walled in, not destroyed, because they were sacred, and destroying them entirely would have been impious, but hidden, enclosed in stone so no one could see them. Her image was replaced, sometimes with Thutmose II, sometimes with Thutmose III himself, sometimes with a blank space. For more than 3,000 years, Egyptologists reading the official record saw only male pharaohs in that period. There was a gap, a missing time, an anomaly. But no woman, no Hatshepsut, just a name that didn't appear anywhere it should have. She had been deleted. But here's what no one expected. A tooth, a single molar, found loose in a small wooden box shaped like a royal cartouche, bearing her name, in a storage cache at the Cairo Museum. Unconnected for decades to any body, a mummy in a side chamber nearby, unnamed, uncelebrated, whose identity had been debated for a century. In 2007, a forensic team matched the tooth to the mummy's jaw. The socket fit, the root matched. She had been sitting in a museum storage room for over 100 years. No one knew who she was. That's what erasure looks like when it fails. Not a dramatic discovery, not a golden tomb, a tooth in a box, a body no one had bothered to identify. 3,000 years of silence, ended by a dental match. But this is where things get complicated, because the erasure was not complete. And that incompleteness is the real mystery. Her tomb was sealed, not destroyed. Her mummy, or what is believed to be her mummy, was moved carefully and placed in a secondary chamber, wrapped and stored alongside a box bearing her royal cartouche. Someone did this deliberately. Someone chose to preserve her body, even while others were destroying her image. The wall paintings in her mortuary temple, the ones showing the expedition to Punt, the ones showing her divine birth, the ones showing her coronation, were damaged in places, but survived, largely intact, visible to anyone who walked into that temple for the next 30 centuries. Her obelisks were walled in but not toppled. When those walls were eventually demolished, the obelisks were still standing, still perfectly upright, still inscribed with her name. Someone did not finish the job, and here is the question that no one can fully answer. Why? 3 theories, all of them reasonable, none of them proven. The first, Thutmose III was protecting his own legacy. If Hatshepsut had ruled, and ruled well, and ruled for longer than he had by the time he ordered the erasure, then her existence made his reign look borrowed. Her erasure wasn't about hatred, it was about ownership. History would belong to him, not her. The second, the erasure was religious and legal, not personal. In ancient Egypt, to rule was to be divine. If Hatshepsut had declared herself pharaoh and worn the beard and taken the titles, then her divine authority needed to be returned to the proper line, not destroyed. Redirected, the monuments were altered so that the divine power they represented would flow to male heirs, not to a woman whose claim disrupted the theological order. The third theory is harder to say out loud, but historians have said it. Maybe someone wanted her erased publicly, but preserved privately. Maybe the incompleteness wasn't an oversight. Maybe the person who ordered the destruction also quietly issued a second instruction. Go far enough that no one asks questions, but not so far that nothing remains. Someone with enough power to run a kingdom-wide erasure campaign, and enough conscience, or grief, or political calculation to make sure the body stayed intact and the obelisks stayed standing. Someone who managed her disappearance from history while refusing to let her disappear entirely. No one knows. No one can know. That question went into the ground with her and stayed there for 3,000 years. What is certain is this: the erasure was organized. It required resources. It required workers with chisels and scaffolding and time. It required someone giving orders across multiple sites, temples, tombs, storerooms, over what appears to have been years. This wasn't a single decision made in anger. It was a sustained campaign, and yet, the people who carried it out left gaps, damage that stopped short of destruction. A mummy moved to safety instead of disposed of. Objects sealed in boxes rather than smashed. It is almost as if two instructions were being followed at once, one that said, "Erase her," and one, quieter, that said, "Not entirely." Most people who study this period focus on the damage, on what was taken, on the missing faces and the altered cartouches, and the blank spaces on walls where her image used to be. But the more unsettling question is why anything survived at all. She ruled for more than 2 decades. She had enemies. She had people who needed her gone. They had every tool, every authority, every reason to finish the job completely. They didn't, and whatever the reason, political calculation, religious scruple, or something that doesn't have a clean historical name. That failure is the only reason this story exists. Her mortuary temple still stands on the west bank of the Nile at Deir el-Bahri, 3 colonnaded terraces cut into the face of a limestone cliff. The design is unlike anything else in Egypt. Elegant, horizontal, almost modern in its proportions. When you walk up the processional ramp toward the entrance, there are rows of damaged statues lining the path. Most of them headless. Their faces were the first things removed, but the bodies are still there. The hands still rest on the knees in the posture of authority. The shoulders still sit square. The posture still says, "This person ruled here." Someone wanted the world to forget her, and someone, maybe the same person, made sure enough remained that she couldn't be entirely forgotten. The obelisks she built at Karnak still stand. One of them is the tallest ancient obelisk in Egypt. It is covered from base to tip in inscriptions. Her titles, her names, her achievements. For centuries, those inscriptions were walled in. Hidden inside the stone casing Thutmose III ordered built around them. When the casing came down, the inscriptions were perfectly preserved. The stone that was meant to silence her had protected her instead. Her personal name, the name she was given at birth, before the throne names and the divine titles, was Hatshepsut. It means foremost of noble women. For 3,000 years, that name did not appear on any monument that anyone could read. The official record of ancient Egypt had no place for her. The king's lists, compiled by later pharaohs, skipped her entirely, moving from her husband's reign to her stepson's, as if the 22 years in between had never existed. But in her temple, behind the damaged reliefs, beneath layers of plaster, applied during the erasure, the original paint survived. In places, you can still see the colors she chose, the blue of the sky in the coronation scene, the gold of the divine figures, the deep green of the expedition ships cutting through foreign water. She chose those colors. She approved those images. She stood in that temple and looked at those walls while the paint was still wet. 3,000 years later, her choices are still visible. History erased her name. It could not erase what she built. The mask is gone. The throne name was cut away. The official record has a gap where her reign should be. But the ships still sail on the wall of her temple. The obelisks still stand at Karnak. A tooth in a wooden box with her name on it still fits the jaw of a woman who suffered and ruled and was buried in secret and was not supposed to be found. She was powerful enough to be worth erasing. That is the only reason we know she existed at all.